I'm going to read this in praise of Susan Claire Sagan. I met Susan on St. Patrick's Day in Chicago in 1984. The day began with a traditional parade and a speech by a U.S. Senator named Gary Hart, who was running for president. And then the requisite stop at a neighborhood pub. It was St. Patrick's Day, after all. Outside, snow had begun to fall. A blanket of white was accumulating on the gray streets and sidewalks. I hadn't intended to stay long, but then, through the doors of Durkin's pub, burst two women. One was a brunette, the other a blonde with big eyes and that signature wide electric smile. Following them were several members of a male rugby team. It was, as I would come to understand, a classic Susan moment. You see, Susan, who had graduated 2 years earlier from the University of Illinois and spent a year traveling in Europe, had recently moved into a little coach house apartment a few blocks away on the city's north side. She had invited several friends for brunch, always the consummate host. One of these friends, unbeknownst to her, had extended the invitation to the rugby players. It wasn't long before Susan could foresee her St. Patrick's Day brunch turning into something calamitous. So, in the name of material preservation, but also to keep the party alive, she and a friend marched the boys down to the corner tavern, where I had the incredible good fortune to make her acquaintance. Over the next 25 years, we made a unique and loving partnership, and I bore witness to a life of accomplishment and of profound compassion, generosity, and joy lived by a woman who was always the smartest person in the room. Her accomplishments are many. Professionally, Susan was inspired to become a lawyer by her maternal grandfather, Judge Thaddeus Adesco, after whom our oldest son, Tad, is named. She viewed the law as both a means of earning a living and for doing good. As a law student in Columbia, Missouri, she worked with the local public defender to successfully defend a woman wrongly charged with murder for the self-defense killing of her abusive husband. As a clerk to U.S. District Judge Scott O. Wright in Kansas City, she visited prisons to investigate claims of cruel and unusual punishment being leveled by some mighty, unappealing convicts. As a litigator in private practice, she used her pro bono hours to make new law that today protects the Puda Creek fishery near Davis, California. She served in the corporate law offices of Safeway Corp. And Kendall Jackson Wine Estates. After returning to private practice, she has earned a reputation and multiple recognitions for being the go-to lawyer for businesses looking to navigate the complex, politically touchy, and often high-stakes landscape of alcoholic beverage regulation. The stream of messages of goodwill and support from her clients last week has buoyed those of us who love her. Susan was rightly proud of her ability to balance career and motherhood, and without fail has been an advocate for women in the workplace and in business. The Facebook page established to keep her family and friends connected during her last days carries testaments to her mentorship of younger women throughout her career. She brought this spirit to service on the boards of the Women's Chefs and Restaurateurs Association and other organizations. And yes, good food was important to her too. She preferred to buy it at the Marin County Farmers Market and prepare meals herself to share at table with family and friends, most famously during dinner parties that would stretch long into the evening with laughs, music, boisterous conversation. In the mornings, the kitchen, impeccably designed by Susan herself, by the way, would be littered with pots, plates, silverware, glasses, and empty bottles of red wine, evidence of a good time had by all. Susan harbored a bit of a fascination with show business and got a kick out of counting among her clients a certain celebrity who goes by the initials JT. Susan loved movies. I think her favorites were Breakfast at Tiffany's and Out of Africa. She loved literature too and devoured novels at an astonishing clip. The book Susan left on her nightstand that last morning before leaving for work was A Mercy by Toni Morrison. She loved to hike on Mount Tamalpais with our dogs Lulu and Twinkletoes. I think it became her favorite place on earth. She dreamed of a trip to Mount Kilimanjaro. She loved a costume party. Her Sarah Palin this Halloween was second to none. But my favorite was back in graduate school when she went as Tippi Hedren, donning a crown made of a pillbox hat, wire, and spray-painted black styrofoam birds. She loved to ski fast through mogul fields and made sure our sons, Tad and Will, climbed on a chairlift at an early age. I couldn't keep up with her on those slopes, or anywhere else for that matter. Her advice to me, just keep both shoulders pointed downhill. Her greatest joy and proudest accomplishment, of course, was motherhood. It began May 8th, 1992, with the birth of our first son, Thaddeus Wilson Finney. It was made doubly rich on February 8th, 1995, with the arrival of our second son, William Joseph Finney. Susan relished telling the story of how the song Too Hard to Handle was playing in the delivery room when Tad was born, and how Will was so anxious to emerge in the world that he threw her into labor 5 weeks early, at the office, of course. Susan may be gone, but she can be seen in Tad's grace under fire as a shortstop and a pitcher, and in his acing his chemistry final. She lives in Will's sense of citizenship and determination on the basketball court and between the goalposts on the soccer field. One of my last images of Susan prior to dropping her off at work that last day was her walking arm in arm with Will outside our local market, sending him on his way to day camp with her big, wide, electric smile. One of my last conversations with her, as we drove across the Golden Gate Bridge that day, was how she so looked forward to accompanying Tad to a baseball showcase scheduled for the last 2 days of June, and then stealing away with him alone for the first days of a planned family vacation at Lake Tahoe. Susan died too early, my friends. Ironically, she did so at the same hospital where she became a mother. But before she did, we ought remember, she raised 2 young men who, though despondent, stood tall by her bedside, sealed her feet, temple, and hands with oil as she was read her last rites, and gave her up to God. The burst aneurysm that felled Susan on Tuesday, June 23, seemed so cruel because of the damage it did to that extraordinary mind. In a way, the second aneurysm rupture that took her 8 days later was a mercy of another sort. We all know that Susan knew only one way to live, at top speed with both shoulders pointed downhill. We mourn and grieve, to be sure, but it is also true that Susan's shocking illness, devastatingly painful though it is, has restored friendships and transformed familial relationships. Through death, Susan also is giving life via organ donation. Yesterday, 4 gravely ill people received her liver, kidneys, lungs, and her heart. We know she would have it no other way. Susan, my dear, a life can be measured in many ways. By any measure, you lived a wonderful, bountiful, important life. You have my eternal gratitude and love. Thank you.